Hi, this is Melanie for Pardesi Reviews. I'm here to do a review of Kumbalangi Nights, the latest Malayalam film starring Fahadh Faasil. What a gem of a little film. All of you had urged me, don't miss this one, don't miss this one. And it finally, a couple weeks delayed, came to Chicago. And it was so worth the drive up to the one theater in Chicago that plays Malayalam cinema. So this is an interesting ensemble piece. It has Fahadh Faasil. He's playing this character who ends up being quite negative, and there's all sorts of creepy music when he's just kind of spying on his wife and her conversations with her sister, and he was very precise about his mustache. It's interesting that Fahadh Faasil, who's played such sympathetic characters, recently picked such a negative kind of role. He's a man that's just trying to take over a household of women. You have four brothers, contrasting, living in a ramshackle house in the bad part of town of this little village. And the four brothers are close, but yet they fight like cats and dogs. In fact, one of the opening scenes has two of the brothers, Shane Nigam and playing Bobby, and Soubin Shahir playing Saji, literally wrestling and rolling in the ground. And other people come by on a boat and they're like, oh, they're brawling again. It's just such a common thing that it's hardly even worth commentary. So the four brothers are rounded out with Boney, played by Sreenath Bhasi, who plays a mute brother named Boney. And then we have Frankie, the youngest brother, who's played by Mathew Thomas. This is the debut director, Madhu Narayanan. The script was written by one of the best scriptwriters in Malayalam cinema, and that is Syam Pushkaran. The film was partially produced by Fahadh Faasil and Nazriya Nazim, and also Dileesh Pothan, who the director of this film had been an assistant director on one of his films. It's such an interesting village. It's a tourist mecca because it's an eco-tourist village where there's all sorts of fishermen who toss their nets into the waterways that surround the village. And I was actually looking up the village itself, and one of the things that's unusual about it is that the town has licensed different homes to have homestays. So tourists get to, not just if they want to stay in a hotel, they can stay in a hotel, but if they want a more authentic experience, they can live with a family. Different families have, rooms to let, and then you eat communal meals with the family. So that is part of the conflict that we see in the trailer. We saw it in the trailer where an African-American woman, she has a confrontation with Fahadh Faasil because she's renting a room at their place, and he's like, in America, yes, India, no, whatever. I'm not going to spoil what she was doing, but she just doesn't even understand what line she's crossed that he is so upset about. So you have this conflict where you have all of these tourists in the town. We have a young romance. Shane Nigam I saw in Parava. He was so good in this. But this one, I just loved his just mop of fluffy hair. He's kind of a ne'er-do-well who doesn't really have a job. But he has the young romance with a brand new actress played by Anna Ben. And then it's her sister played by Grace Anthony, who is very mild-mannered and is married to Fahadh Faasil's Shami character. Baby and Bobby are our young couple, and each of the four brothers is going through troubled times. They have conflicts with each other, but then the thrust of the movie is that they have to pull together and support each other. And then there's a really dramatic, at least for me, it was a very unexpected ending of, what really unites all of them to work together to help out the Bobby character. It's about found families and untraditional families. At least that's what I got out of it. So on its face, Fahadh Faasil with, the nice house and more traditional structures to the family, where you have multiple generations living in the same house. With the four brothers, their mother is no longer living with them. Their father has passed on. We find that out in the first few moments of the film. And so they're living in a house with no women. And then over the course of the movie, some women do join the household, and their ramshackle house that has this just open to the elements, in fact, becomes welcoming to strangers who are visiting the town, who need a place to be. And we find out that part of the reason why their unconventional family happened, they're either half brothers or step brothers or whatever. They're not all full blood brothers. And we find out it's because their father, something that happens in the film, it's similar, that their father took in a widow who needed a place to be. So it's interesting how, they're looked down on by other people in the town for living kind of in the, literally somebody says, oh, that's at the end of the road where people abandon kittens. And I connected that the youngest brother did find like a sack of kittens outside their house. They're just like, living off apart. And yet it's shown how their house is the one that's warm, that's welcoming, and through healing, they do all come together. But, they're not the traditional family that's supposed to be, the ideal, and yet the family that is, from the outside appearances, lives in the nice house, has the outward appearance of being the perfect family. In fact, there's all sorts of undercurrents going on in that household that turned very dark at the end in surprising ways. The acting is all exceptional. Soubin Shahir, he's a good director. He did Parava, where I first saw Shane Nigam, that plays his brother in this film. But he's becoming such a good actor. He was really good in Sudani from Nigeria. And in this film, I thought from the trailer it was going to be all kind of lighthearted. But he really goes through some dark periods in this film. In fact, to the point where he has to ask one of his brothers for help. I'm losing my mind. I need some help. And so I've heard that audiences and Kerala have been laughing at some of the scenes where he really breaks down. That wasn't the reaction of the audience in my Chicago theater. We didn't react like that to that. So I thought it was very touching. He had quite a range that he's shown. I thought Shane Nigam was absolutely charming, even though he's kind of, I think in the subtitles, his girlfriend calls him a hooligan. So he just kind of needs to grow up and get his act together. We don't learn as much about the youngest brother, and we don't learn why the one brother, Boney, is mute, but he has an interesting romance with a stranger that sets off a whole series of events, too. I really liked all the characters, and the first half, we get to know a little bit about all of them, their stories, and then after the interval point, all sorts of crazy things happen that brings everything into focus and helps these four brothers really heal their relationship and come together as a family. And so it's just really heartwarming to see all of that happen. And certain people get a comeuppance that is well deserved. There's a point where there's someone who is a very meek wife finally takes a stand for one of her relatives. She won't ever for herself, but she finally takes a stand for one of her relatives. And that was one of my favorite scenes of the film. I want to be in that village. And I was reading an article that the director himself, in setting out to set the story here, he lived in the village itself for a year and a half. And so he really got to know what the people were like in that village, because it did seem a little bit different from any other Malayalam film that I've seen. I've seen so many that are city settings. I've seen so many that are completely rural settings. And this was, I don't know, it was something in between. It had that idyllic look, but evidently it's a suburb and it's also a tourist center. So that added a whole new interesting complications to the story and the setting and what this village is all about. Someday I would love to go there because it's so beautiful in the film, and the pictures that I saw online of what Kumbalangi looks like, just, oh wow, definitely seems like a place I would want to visit. So anyway, I really love this film. I highly urge you to see it if you can. And hopefully it will come on streaming soon for all the people who weren't able to see it in a theater near them will be able to see it soon, because I highly recommend this film. Really great performances, exceptional script, and just such a heartwarming, good feeling when you come out of the film. Let me know what you thought about this film in the comments below. Such a strong debut by this director. I can't wait to see what he does next as well. Follow me on Twitter at PardeziYT. Subscribe here to the Pardesi channel. And if you hit the bell and you subscribe, then you get a notification whenever I have a new trailer action or a film review.